Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and this is my debugging masterclass. Just basically a lot of tips and tricks I've picked up over the years, or over my journeys in debugging code for JavaScript specifically. Okay, so I mean, you can get pretty far with just using console.log. Okay, console.log is the console object is just a built-in debugging object in JavaScript. So if you're acting in Node, it'll print it here on the terminal screen. If you're in the browser, the console is like right here in your developer tools, and allows you to just do things to debug. There's a variety of things, but console.log specifically allows you to put little messages. Okay, and the way I would generally use this is, let's say I create a function. So const my func equals, okay, and then let's say we have a parameter, so we'll say num, and then basically what this is going to do is return num plus num. What I might do is, to make sure that it works, is I'll console.log num, so that way I can see that the parameter came in the way I expected it to. And then what I might do is console log the return value. So I'll test out the function, make sure that it gives me back what I expect by saying, okay, let's try out the function my func, and we'll try it out with the number 5. So I'm expecting that 5 should go in when we console.log num, and then 5 plus 5, 10 should come out. So I should end up with like 2 console logs. There you go, 5 and 10. And here it tells me in the JavaScript console, okay, this log happened on line 2, this one happened on line 6. That's also very useful, so you know which ones are the ones running and which ones aren't. Okay, and having all those console logs can be useful because, let's say something like this, I don't actually return num plus num. I just say, I do something like, I just assign it to a variable, const result equals num plus num. Well, in that case, now my function's never returning a value, but I am adding num plus num. It's just not doing anything with it. So I can catch that because I see that the number 5 was passed in correctly, but I never got a value. So then I have to be like, okay, let me take a look at what I got returned. Oh, wait, there's no return here. So of course it's not getting anything. Okay, so console.log helps you kind of print things at different points of your code to make sure that each step is working out right. So the idea is, like, you want to do console logs in several steps. The problem is, as you start doing lots and lots of code, these console logs get all over the place. They get and I mean, I still use them 99% of the time to do 99.9% of my debugging, but there's some ways you can just tidy up your logging so that way it looks a little bit better. So one way you could do it is, let's say I have a function that does a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so first, const step 1, it takes num plus num. Const step 2, it takes step 1 and multiplies it by num. And then const step 3, it takes, this should be step 2. Step 3 and divides it by num. Actually, I'll just kind of go subtract by num. Okay, and I want to make sure that it does the right calculation as I would expect it on each step of the way. So what I'm going to do is, I would like to make sure that I know when it's this function console logging versus this console log over here. Okay, and then at this point I want to return step 3. Return step 3, and let me fix up that function here. Step 1, step 2. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, this is feature called console.group collapsed. What this does is that's going to take any console logs between this call and the call of console dot group end. So any console logs here will be in a group, and I want to call the group, you know, myfunc. So this way I know that all the console logs in this myfunc group belong to a run of this function. Okay? And if I want to be fancy, what I could do is something like this. I could use backticks and do myfunc and then interpolate the parameter, so that way I know I'm using this parameter in this invocation. So it would be num. So it'd be like myfunc num. I know it's basically, I know that's what's causing these particular logs. Okay, and then now I can just do console.log step 1, console.log step 2, console.log step 3. Save. Cool. Yeah. Save. And let's see here. If we refresh this. Okay, you see we have this group, myfunc 5, that's the label we gave it. And I can see the console logs that are inside that group. So that way I know these console logs belong inside the function. This is after the function. And now if I call that function several times, so let's say I call this Control Z, Control C, call that one 7, that one we're going to pass in 9. I can hit save, I refresh, and I can see which version. So with the group name, because I use interpolation, has a perfect name, I know which console logs go with which instance of invoking the function. So it makes it much easier for me to go through my code, and because I use group collapsed, you see it's already collapsed, so I don't have to see like this taking up 4 lines. I can just open them up when I need to, which is pretty nice. Makes it much easier to have a lot of information in your console, but have it a little bit more organized, easier to manage, to find what you need. Okay, and there's still more. Okay, so that's true. Okay. So another thing I can do is I can do console log.assert or console.assert. Now what this does is that you're going to pass it a test, and if the test is true, it'll return a message. And if it's false, then it will then give you like an error. So watch step 1. So assert, I want to make sure that step 1 turns out to be the right thing. So step 1 is supposed to be, so step 1 should equal, the test is step 1 should equal num plus num. Okay, if that's not what happens, then we didn't do this right. So that's the test. And then the error, if everything works out, we can put in it worked. Okay, and that's what assert does. It'll first test it, make sure, see if we pass this test, and if it passes the test, then it'll send me a message. So save. Okay, so if I refresh, and I look in my func, the first one, well, I don't see that first console log, it disappeared. Well, I think it only console logs it if it's not working. So let's say it failed. So let's try making this fail. So I'm going to change this to num plus 5. Okay, so that would succeed the first time, because the first time we passed in 5, but it'll fail on the other 2. So if I refresh, see, assertion failed. It failed. But on the first one, it's fine, because it worked. So that doesn't show up. Okay, but I can see it 2 out of 3 times, this did not work. Okay, so that helps me just kind of know, okay, something didn't work. So that's going to be more useful when you have something a little bit more complicated. So you know this, it's going through all these complicated steps, and after these steps, you know where it should end up. So you want to make sure, so you run a test like this. Okay, So in that case, see, I made it where it would pass the test once, but not the other times. Just to show you that that works. Okay, so that's another thing you can do. Console.assert. You could also just, if you want to just put in a warning, so maybe you do your own if statement, and then if, like, let's say I did something like for step 2, if, actually I'll do this after step 2. If step 2 does not equal step 1 times num, because that's what it should be, then what's going to happen, we'll do is do console.warn something is wrong. Okay, so I'm not passing in the test into the function like assert, I'm just calling a warning. Okay, so just to, you know, make this not work, I'm going to change this to 5 because it'll work for the first one but not for the other two, so you can see the difference. Save. Okay, now if I look at the myfunc5, see, no warning because that should have worked. But if I take a look at the second one, something is wrong. So it gave me a warning and it tells me, okay, this is where the thing happened. Okay, so you can build in little checks to help you find when things go wrong to make it easier for you to debug. Okay, and these are tools that people put into other frameworks so that way you get errors, so you know when you're not using the code right. And you get errors that tell you something. Okay, so this is useful stuff to know. Makes your life easier, especially as you start building more and more crazier applications. Okay. Cool. And there's a few more. Let's go back to here. Now you don't have to do it. You see how this starts with a group collapse and it started with like the group was collapsed. If you want the group to start open, you would just do group. Okay, and then they'll start open and you would collapse them yourself. I prefer group collapse. I'd rather have to, you know, expand it, but have everything nice and neater than the other way around, but that's your choice. Okay, so let me just re-show that difference. So you see this difference, they're all open already. I didn't have to open them up. Okay, so you have that choice. But either way, it ends when group ends comes in. Okay, and then let me get rid, no, we'll keep the group. But I'm going to get rid of these console logs. I'm going to get rid of the warning. I'm going to get rid of the assert. You guys get the idea. Okay, and then there's console.count. Okay, and console.count, like group, you can pass in a label, so I'll put in a little label. But all it does is count. So basically, every time you run this function with the same label, it's going to add one to a counter. Okay, so it'll be like do. And the reason you would do this is because that way you can see, like, I would expect that if this successfully ran, this counter should count to 3 because it'd be 1, 2, 3. If for some reason I don't get 3 counts, something went wrong with the function. So as an example, let's say let's create an error here. Okay, so basically there's no variable name. That's not good. Okay, so there's an error. I'm gonna refresh. Okay, that's too much of an error that it breaks it right up on code start. So I think of an error, a runtime error, one that'll not break until I actually run the function. Oh, I should call that step 3 again. Step 3. Okay, I know. Let's do step. I'll put .num.num. So it's going to think it's an object and not be able to access the property. So I hit save. See, it doesn't realize there's an error yet because it hasn't tried to look for this num property yet on this function, on this object that really doesn't exist. Okay, so if I refresh, see no error. Well, now there's an error. Okay, but like I see here, I see click 1, 2, 3. It still clicked 1, 2, 3. It just returned me nan. So that didn't quite. But my point is that basically if something prevents the function from running all the way, so let's say if you have a function that is erroring a lot and you're trying to figure out where it's erroring, by putting the counts you can see did it get past step 1, step 2, step 3, because it's making a count each step of the way. You know, especially if you don't want to be typing out huge console messages, you can just keep copying and pasting this count, and you're going to get a unique number each time without having to retype the same thing over and over again. Okay, and then the last one I want to go over is time. So I'm going to get rid of group and the count. And let's say I want to know how long this function runs for. Okay. So when you do, I think it's console.time, this starts a timer. And then what you would do is you put it at the end of the function. So we'll put it right here before the return, console.time end. I think it's time end. Okay, and what it'll do is starts the timer here, runs through all the commands, and then it's going to end the timer there. And I think it'll log out the time that it took between those 2 points. Okay, so if I do that, let's refresh, and there you go. See the milliseconds. So the first time took a little bit, took 1.8 milliseconds, and then the second 2 times were much quicker. Okay, and looks like you can put in a label. So we can put in, so I could probably do the same thing again. My func, use interpolation to put in my num. So that way it dynamically has a name. Save. Timer default does not exist. No, I guess not. Okay, but you can set up a timer that way. You can see how long the function ran each time. Yay. Doop, boop, boop. Okay, although I think you can pass a label somewhere. I just probably did it wrong, so let's go look it up. So where are you? DOM console. Okay, that will load just because I figured it's nice to label things so that way you can see what makes it just quicker for you to think. You don't have to sit there and try to figure out, okay, it belongs to this line of code, so let me go back and take a look. Okay, so if you can put a label, I'd like to show you guys where the label comes in. It's console.time, you put in the label right there. So why didn't that work before? Okay, test 1. Okay, so control Z. My func num. Okay, let's just run it again. Might just be the interpolation that's messing it up. Oh, I know why. You gotta put the label in the end too, because it's looking for default. Okay, so there you go, timer end, and then it's gonna look for that same label again, and then we do that. I should fix it. There you go. My func 5 milliseconds, milliseconds, milliseconds. Okay. So yeah, I mean, these are all tools you have within that console object to do some debugging, to test your code, make sure it's doing what you think it's doing, put in things to help you catch errors down the road, and it's good to know. It's good to be aware that you have these tools, and it'll just make you a better programmer to build in these kind of things to help you not have to spend forever debugging something. Okay. So this was mainly about the console object, but of course, you have all the other dev tools that help you take a look at what your DOM looks like, take a look at where information's coming from, like, how many CSS files are being pulled in, taking a look at all the different like network calls. If you want to take a look at like different, is it calling a GraphQL API? What information is it sending? What information is it getting back? All these different tabs. Really just these first 4 I use a lot. I don't think I've ever really use these other ones. I do use this one, application. What I usually would use here is I'll look to see what is stored, usually in local, because I'll sometimes use local storage, or I'm working on another website, and the website I'm working on will store stuff in local storage that I might want to use as a variable. So I might want to look in here, local storage, any cookies that are there. Again, this is just a blank HTML page, so it doesn't have any of that. But you can see all that information that's being stored on your computer here, which is useful. It might be useful also when you're on your favorite website